For the longest time, people thought that the corruption of the Emerald Dream and birth of the Emerald Nightmare was the work of Xal'atath. But what if I were to tell you that that was wrong? That the old god truly responsible for the corruption was a much more devious and cunning one. The old god responsible for the corruption of Ysera's domain and the birthing of the Emerald Nightmare was actually Yogg-Saron, who in my opinion was the most dangerous old god to have ever existed on Azeroth. I mean, yeah, sure, it has been stated that Y'Shaarj was the most powerful of them all, but Yogg-Saron was by far the most intelligent, the most cunning, and the most resourceful. But going back to the subject, how did the Emerald Nightmare form exactly? Well, 10,000 years ago, the old gods who were held captive in their Titan Keeper prison suddenly started to become more active than they have been in the previous thousands of years. This was because the Sundering during the War of the Ancients had weakened their prisons, restoring a portion of their strength. Throughout the years following the Sundering, the old gods began to seep their corruption to the world's surface. A prime example of this would be Saronite appearing in Northrend, which would be the result of Yogg-Saron's doing. By the way guys, just a refresher, Saronite is the ore that is mined in Northrend, and it is what Icecrown Citadel is entirely made up of. It is Saronite. So at this time, Saronite was spreading throughout the land, driving animals and humanoids insane, sending them into a rabid frenzy and sapping the land of flora. When the Cenarian Circle discovered this, they decided to take action and destroy it. They then came to the conclusion that a world tree could heal the lands, and if they planted one in Northrend, then it would ultimately eradicate the Saronite entirely. One druid of the Cenarian Circle became completely fascinated and even obsessed with this idea. That druid was Fandral Staghelm. However, several of the druids stated that he should inform the dragon aspects, seek their aid, and ask them of their blessings, since without the blessings on another world tree, matters could become much worse, since the tree could potentially become more susceptible to corruption without the blessings of the aspects. Fandral, however, was like, fuck it. Without informing the other druids or the aspects, he and his followers broke off 6 branches from Drasil and planted additional world trees around Azeroth. One in Ashenvale, one in the Crystal Song Forest, another in Feralis, 2 more in Duskwood and the Hinterlands, and the final one in the Grizzly Hills. The final one in the Grizzly Hills was known as Drasil, Crown of the Snow, and immediately after it was planted, the spread of Saronite halted and wildlife began to once again flourish. This went on for a while until a couple of decades later, terrible things began to happen. Bloody battles began to erupt between the creatures of the land surrounding Drasil. Creatures such as the Tonka and the forest nymphs, who were not aggressive in nature whatsoever. However, their conflicts, which erupted out of nowhere, were incredibly horrific. Just how they killed one another were shockingly vicious and completely vile. When the druids found this out, they returned to Drasil, where they found the cause of the strange events. Drasil had grown so much that its roots had traveled so deep to where they actually physically touched the prison of Yogg-Saron. Yogg-Saron had corrupted the tree with dark energies from the void, causing all creatures within the land to be driven to madness. In the end, this was the result of Fandral's rash decision. Because he refused to contact the aspects, they were unable to bless it, meaning that the world tree was susceptible to corruption. Now with Drasil having been corrupted and with no other option in mind than to destroy the world tree entirely in order to halt the corruption, the druids destroyed Drasil, renaming the world tree as Vordrasil, meaning broken crown. However, unknown to the druids at that time was that although yes, they did manage to stop the corruption of the world tree by ultimately ending its life, Yogg-Saron had already inflicted much harm to both the physical world and the dreaming one as well. Yogg-Saron had used the world trees that Fandral and his followers had planted around Azeroth as a gateway into Ysera's domain. Through this act, the other old gods such as Xal'atath were able to corrupt the dream, planting seeds of darkness throughout the tranquil realm, which in time completely flooded the dreamways with darkness, ultimately giving birth to the Emerald Nightmare. And that is pretty much how the Emerald Nightmare was formed. That is why Xal'atath, Blade of the Black Empire, whispers, "Yogg-Saron's nightmare in full bloom fills me with jealousy and pride." The nightmare he is referring to is the Emerald Nightmare.